This is one of the complicated shots from the German battle sequence that we had to devise a way of approaching and filming it to show thousands and thousands of advancing Roman troops against thousands of German troops with very few extras to play with. The way we approached the problem was to shoot a series of locked positions where we were able to reposition the few troops we had in different positions and continue to refilm them. This illustrates the pan and how we did it. It was made up of essentially 3 different camera positions, which when put side by side in post-production would allow us to do a post-camera move. These 3 plates show the positions of the individual camera pans. This is one camera position, and if I slide over you can see, indicated by the yellow wireframe, the extent of the other extreme camera position. Then in the middle is the centre camera position. For this first camera position we would have probably 5 plates, one which would have troops centred gathered in the trees back here, one which would be for firing the catapults, because that was another problem. Because the catapults obviously were firing real flaming pots, we couldn't have troops in front or around them because it was extremely dangerous. We filmed the catapults and their crews separately. We then filmed the archers in the front row firing their arrows separately. Again, the arrows fell short of their destination, so again we couldn't have people in the foreground. And then we moved the extras who were playing the soldiers back here to the front and shot them in their foreground positions as the advancing armies. Now this is one of the extra layers that we shot for the catapults that we've brought in, and you can see here the catapult and its green screen and the crew operating the catapult. Because basically they had only 2 catapults built, yet Ridley wanted 6 in the at least 6 in the final comp. This had to look a lot larger than it was achievable on the day. So what we did after we'd finished the filming of the battle sequences, we put in green screens behind the catapults. The first thing we had to do was actually cut the catapult from its background using the green screen. The green screens covered mostly the action of the catapult arm and the crews who were operating it. It would then allow us just to soft mat around the base of the crew and just blend the mud into the original background plates. So that first of all we pulled the key from the background plates and then separated the rest of the background, and you can see now I've got the catapult isolated and I can now move it into a different position and position it and its crew into the background plates. This then allows me to then affect the overall position of the 3 tiles with the catapult now locked in position in its new position. This is the final composite shot with the original 2 positions of the catapults that were in the original plate, and these catapults here, here and here are the green screen digitally repositioned catapults that we cut out, moved along with the crews who were operating them, and then put into the environment along with all the other troops. The catapults have been matted into the background, and then the flaming firepots have been digitally added to continue their trajectory across a greater distance than it was possible to fire them, and time to land exactly where the explosions are happening in the trees, basically. The arrows and smoke trails have all been added digitally as well afterwards. Again, this was a problem with the distance that they could actually fire the arrows on the set. The distance was too great for them to actually reach the other woods, so we had to take over from on-set practical arrows to digital arrows and add digital smoke trails to make them land in and around the German troops.
This is one of the large, wide establishing shots of Rome, and what you're seeing on the monitor here at the moment is the original plate which was shot in Malta, and of course, as you can see, there's no big city at all. It's just a road heading off into the hills. This particular shot was when Russell Crowe and the other gladiators first arrive in Rome, and we really wanted to convey an impression of a huge city. So this is what we had to work with, and we decided to use photo montage, matte painting technique to achieve this. They decided on the particular camera move they wanted, and the city was to be quite far away. There was not going to be any pans through the city, and so there would be no real perspective changes on the city itself. It could remain almost like a still image, but with a camera move on it. And so a 2D matte painting montage, photo montage, is more appropriate than the time you take to do it in a CG 3D environment. Yeah, all the elements we needed for this particular shot were taken as photographic stills, mainly out in Malta, of buildings that looked Romanesque enough to fit in with the shot. It would then be my job, basically, to compile those stills and also paint on top of them, because a lot of them actually looked too old, and we had to make them look like a new Rome, like it was just freshly built. And a lot of work went into taking, I mean, almost 200 stills or more, really, to create walls, to create buildings, create temples. So what you see here is a few of those stills put together. This is 2 walls from a harbour in Malta. Again, they've been slightly treated, taking off areas of the foliage and brickwork just to make them look a little bit more new. And as you can see, as we just quickly scroll through, we've got more walls, we've got an arch. The ground as well, the actual road to Rome, which existed, they wanted to have a junction halfway along. So what we did here was, this wouldn't have been stills, this would have been direct image manipulation on the plate, whereby you can extend the road and make it longer and create a junction where other people can be walking along the road at the same time. It took a good few weeks to do. There was a lot of changes because ultimately people, nobody really knows how the city should look. You have to kind of create it so it's as most aesthetically pleasing as possible, and that can be very time consuming. You can find that you've got the building that you want, you want to put it there, but do you want it a little bit bigger, do you want it a little bit smaller, do you want to change the colour? A lot of the time also there was problems with the shadows, because you can take as many stills as you like out in Malta, but you can put them in and the shadows can be a little bit wrong, or the angle that they're shot at can be a little bit wrong. So it's a long process to tweak those stills to get them to slot in and hopefully look as realistic as possible. Here we have the final shot, and as the camera pans up, the matte painting is revealed. But what we also have going on here are other elements to help make the shot more convincing and more realistic. We can't really just do it with a painting. So we also have elements of 3D animation from little people in carts, little people on horses just strolling along. Also dust clouds generated up from the horses, and also we've got some birds floating around in there as well. So it's a combination really of highly treated matte painting and 3D animation to give it that little bit of extra realism.
This is one of the, in fact, probably the biggest shot in the film. It's a helicopter shot over Rome that really wanted to use to show the sort of scale of the buildings in Rome and also the scale of the Colosseum. In his words, it was like the mothership coming in to land, basically. One of the big problems we were going to have with this shot was that the sets were fantastic and elaborate and huge, but always meant to work from the ground level. They were designed to actually work so that the cameraman could get their shots on the ground, but from the air they didn't work at all. As you can see, the buildings are not dressed at all. You can see where the plaster walls are joined with scaffolding in between. You can see all the rigging around the top of the Colosseum and the fact that there's only a very small fraction of it built. We knew we were going to have to replace an awful lot of this set, if not 70–80% of it, with computer graphics. The other big problem was that Ridley wanted thousands and thousands of people. His vision of Rome was a densely populated city like New York is these days. And to do that, we knew that we'd never have the extras on set available. So we were going to have to generate computer graphics people as well to populate the streets, as well as the actual Colosseum itself. So what we've done is we've photographed a lot of those extras to generate textures of their clothing that we can texture map onto computer-generated bodies that we then apply motion capture movement to So we can generate thousands and thousands and thousands of computer graphics people and give them paths and movement which they all follow, and obviously create far more people than we were actually able to shoot, which I can illustrate here. Now we have actually shot other actions to do with, we've created market stalls with vendors selling produce. We've actually got a little street theatre going on down here, where we've got acrobats doing cartwheels and a crowd of people watching. So we've generated a lot of different actions to simulate the sort of busyness of a working city. The next step was to design the buildings around the Colosseum and the look of the buildings, and we did that in conjunction with Ridley. Basically, we basically created a street plan of Rome, based on reference and based on his input, because it was quite a stylised look. Once we'd agreed on the layout and the type of buildings, and especially the height, because it's something that Ridley wanted to get over, was the fact that a lot of these Roman buildings were sometimes 6 stories high. They were skyscrapers, you know, in their time. The areas of the plate were divided into different blocks that we could break down more easily the buildings, because there was actually an awful lot of information to deal with. This area up here, for instance, we created a small sort of 4-story townhouse type building, which sits here. Now that's the computer graphic element composited through its mat onto the background plate, and you can see how it's in isolation. It doesn't make any sense. When I include all of the other buildings that were put into the final shot, you can see just how many different areas and buildings we had to actually generate and build and stylize. The building itself was made out of textured elements that we generate in 3D, which act as pure texture, which we got from the set by photographing stills of the various different walls and existing elements on the set that the art department had created, as well as other real walls that were already there. These obviously were invaluable as stone textures, roof textures, that we could then apply to the CG model. Having established the textures, then we need to actually grade the textures to create shadows and highlights and give the house, in this case, form and depth. And we do that using various different mats that are generated in computer graphics. We have the mat which cuts the house out and puts it onto the background, and then we have mats such as this which create the ambient light that surrounds the house, and then the shadow areas such as these dark arches you can see in here. So this is just one of the buildings that we generated in computer graphics, and then once we've actually textured and lit it, we have to put it into the background scene. So you can see now it's in position with the original helicopter plate that was shot. Now this is just one of the buildings. We had to do it for many other buildings, and I can show you now the way that it was actually built up. Adding more and more buildings. Some of the main, more grandiose buildings are in the main street here.
Yeah.
And then the final composite looks like this, where we've got all of the buildings in shot. You'll also notice that we've actually populated the buildings with computer graphics people, as well as the streets, and the street stalls and the vendors selling their wares, and even computer graphics smoke up here. Now, all of the outer wall had to be recreated in computer graphics, as well as the people within the Colosseum. As you'll notice on the original set, there was only a partial section of the wall built, which they used for close-ups that they could shoot on the ground. So we've recreated the wall and obviously generated the top of the Colosseum and all of the Valerium and the people populating it up here. The inside of the arena was originally shot clean with just a small horse and sand scraper. It was decided that they would rather have a fight sequence and a full arena. So we generated digital horses with motion capture and chariots and a few dead bodies lying around, basically, and recreated one of the big Carthage type fight scenes within the arena. All of the crowd is also been added digitally, again using our various crowd techniques that we've developed to do this film. There are areas of the original set sort of still hidden under here, but as you can see, most of it has been replaced with the computer graphics, this being the only partial part of the live set that could be filmed.
The Colosseum itself was built on a computer as a three-dimensional model, which we're looking at a part of here. But obviously to make the model look as realistic as possible, which was required for the film, we needed to render it in several stages, which were then put together to give us the final results. First of which, being this, which is a key light pass, which just gives us the effect of the sunlight on the model as it would sit into the shot. We then put that together with a radiosity pass, which shows us the amount of bounce light you'd get off the floor and off the sky and off the buildings around it in the set. The wireframe model then obviously needs to be textured to look like the Colosseum that's going to appear in the film. So we collected hundreds of reference photographs from the Malta set itself, photographs such as these, which were then textured onto the wireframe model to give us the final look. Well, once the modelling, texturing and lighting has been completed in 3D, we end up with this final element here which can be given to 2D, and they will then go and put it into the live action plates that we've received.
This is the 360, the original background plate, shot on location in Malta. And our job with this is to replace the missing parts of the set. There's a big gap in the middle where there's no set at all. And at the front and end of the shot, we have to put the top half of the set in. It's a handheld shot in the steady cam, so there's lots of roll, lots of wobble to track elements in and to complete the shot. It's also a very long shot, done as a continuous move. It's technically very difficult. So we actually have a site survey, so 3D track the shot. They take specific markers on the set and digitize a track working off things like this and this to produce a full 3D move. They then insert their 3D model with the same move. The next thing we do is add the crowd. Again, it's a full CG crowd. And at this stage, it's not graded in. Then from there, add in the floor, various other articles like these pillars called stellas. That's part of the finessing process, topping it off, adding in smoke, dust, the base, adding motion blur, and then lighting, grading to match the live action plate. If I just go back to the live action plate, it's obviously a very bleached look. And we're moving from shadow through to sunlight and back into shadow throughout the move. So we've got to match all those nuances, all those lighting changes with the CG plate. Once this CG background's generated and the crowd added, the dust elements, we go back to the live action plate and generate masks. And this allows us to combine the two plates together. So here we've got a mask generated of the gladiators. There's a lot of hand painting goes on in here, retouching frame by frame for the whole sequence. And that allows us to combine the foreground and the background, and it gives us the final shot. Okay, so we've generated the mats from this live action plate. We can then combine the live action with the CG background. And here's the final comp.
Basically, we had a shot of several shots of Russell Crowe in the Colosseum, along fighting an imaginary tiger, because you couldn't have wild tiger in the same place as Russell Crowe. Basically, the tigers were shot on a blue screen, with the same lighting conditions as the day itself. We basically matted out the tiger, kept all the dust information to make it look like it is actually there, not floating above ground, effectively. And made the tiger slightly bigger according to Ridley's wishes, and put him in, really. And the challenging thing was actually what happened behind the scenes, where they, for example, didn't like how the crowd was reacting, so we had to replace the crowd in some of the shots. They didn't like how the teams behind here holding the tigers were reacting, so we had to replace them. The editor would choose the right take for a tiger with the right swipe and the right camera angle, And this, for example, is where Russell Crowe would be somewhere around here. Because we have a blue screen, we can actually pull most of the shot out, replace the tiger and put him somewhere else. I mean, a shot like this, for example, I can get a matte edge of this. And obviously we have to do some cleanup, something we ended up doing. And basically just drop him into the shot, more or less. This is the final comp, effectively, where you have the tiger has been composited on top of the background plate. We added shadows, we replaced the team that was holding the tiger because their action wasn't in sync with the tiger itself. We also did some atmospheric dust where we dusted up the whole plate. We had dust around the tiger, all the kicks of dust that you see here, and that's about it really. And the things like extend the shadows to make it look like the Russell Crowe and the tiger are nearly in contact.
To actually populate the inside of the Colosseum with crowd, we shot individual people on the video, like this. Right. So once we got them shot on green screen, we can extract the people from the background, and we can also isolate their togas. And once we've got that, we can multiply them and vary their colors to actually obtain an entire crowd of cheering people, which never existed in the first place. Once we created this crowd, it gets given to a 2D department to actually composite the crowd, the Colosseum, and any other elements with the actual live-action plates to create the final picture.
We were required to do some 3D people because we were building sets and so on. So we had people where they couldn't actually shoot live action. So it was decided that we could deal with that by making little 3D people that slightly more detailed than some of the other ones that you may have been seeing. And we did that using motion capture, capturing the motion of performers. This is what has come out of the motion capture shoot. It's digitised data that records the actual movements of real actors. This is our starting point from which we create our 3D people that we put in the finished scene. So what we have here is now we've taken that data and we've joined it up and formed a skeleton, and we've got kind of primitive mannequin type figures here doing what is essentially real motion. We've also started to add props, stepping over boxes, carrying things around, throwing things. This was all action that was done for the top of the Colosseum for the shot when we went over the top. We've come this far, but now obviously they're not real people yet. We need to texture them and give them an envelope, give them clothes, give them skin to make them look like the real people, and then add the lighting. So now what we've added is these are slaves, and we've added skin textures to them, put muscles in the joints and so on, put clothing on them, put textures on the props, and also added the lighting. So this is now the completed stage.